Hey guys, it's me. I do hope you're all doing well. Today I'm going to talk about a book which just launched itself, or flew itself rather, to the top of my all-time favorite list. It's Bram Stoker's Dracula. I so very recently finished this book and have become a great admirer of it the moment I finished and closed it. I just can't believe that this was written more than a century ago because it feels so modern in many ways. So just a heads up before I proceed, there will be mild spoilers in this review. So if you haven't read it and you want to go into this book blind, then just come back once you are able to finish it. And if you still need convincing into reading this book, then please stay. Published in 1897, this was written by the Irish writer Bram Stoker. Although not the very first vampire story ever told, Dracula certainly is the longest standing one. We may call this the GOAT of all vampire tales now, but this actually didn't sell well during Bram Stoker's lifetime. In fact, this was outsold by Richard Marsh the Beetle. On the screen is how the first edition cover looked like in 1897. And this is how the first US edition cover looked like after it came out 2 years after, in 1899. I have here this thrifted Barnes & Noble Classics edition, which I got from Books Around the Corner. If you're in the Philippines, you can check their FB link in my description. This is the instance where the cover has compelled me to finally get around to reading the novel. This cover features a picture of a castle in Bavaria. It is spooky, very beautiful in the most mysterious way. So intriguing and enticing at the same time. I suggest that you really find an edition that will make you read it. This edition in particular did it for me. On screen are some of the editions of the book which could help you get into the mood into reading it. Just a quick reminder, if your edition has an introduction in it, read the introduction after reading the story, because most of these introductions have spoilers in them. I personally love to have introductions and notes in my editions because I want to learn more about the book, the author, and the context of when the story was written. This particular edition has the introduction and notes by Brooke Allen. Also, a quick story. This thrifted copy I got has annotations made by the previous owner. Let me share it with you. Take a look. See? He or she definitely was actively reading this novel. So this is actually my first time to read a book with annotations of its previous owner, and surprisingly I find it to be very comforting because the words that I found to be quite difficult for me were also encircled here. So for example, the word languid was encircled. See? I didn't know it too. It's just a nice feeling to know that I'm not the only one who doesn't know these words. The annotations, the underlines also encouraged me to really actively read the story. Then a curious thing happened. I noticed that the annotations suddenly stopped on page 250. See? It stopped right here. And there are no annotations anymore right after. This definitely made me sad. I don't think that the previous owner DNF'd this masterpiece. It certainly doesn't look like this story bored him so suddenly. So I want to think that maybe his collector's edition arrived in the mail and decided to read the rest of the story in that edition instead. Anyways, I came into this book thinking that this is a love story about Dracula and his reincarnated wife, because that is what I could remember from the 90s Francis Ford Coppola movie, which I saw when I was still in high school. So I was very surprised, well, actually very shocked to learn that it's nothing like the adaptation. The story, at least for me, was actually more like a Scooby-Doo mystery, in the sense that you have this gang of friends who made it their mission to solve the mystery of Dracula. Each member of this group I came to love. That is why I was so heartbroken from the ending. I definitely didn't expect it, especially since I couldn't remember the ending of that Coppola movie. I actually am still bitter that the one who died has to be the one to die in the ending. The entire story is told through the accounts of others, specifically through journal entries, letters made by the primary characters. There's even newspaper clippings and even a ship's logs or records. So how cool is that? Remember, this was written more than a century ago, and that kind of structure is definitely very uncommon in a novel, but I found it to be very easy to follow. I find it brilliant that the story was told through the accounts of others and not just a direct narration of what the Count is doing, what his exact thoughts are, or what his next plans are. By using this particular structure of telling a story, everything about the Count remains a mystery. I would even go as far as comparing this to the alluring mystery of Daphne du Maurier's Rebecca, one of my all-time favorite classics. We only get to see a closer look at the Count at the first 50 pages of this book through Jonathan Harker's initial journal entries and in the last few pages of it. The majority of the book is about how the primary characters got together to eventually defeat the Count. Even though the Count wasn't present physically in the majority of this story, he was never out of the picture because he casts this foreboding shadow throughout the book. The language in general is easy to understand, and even though there are several medical terms in this, these terms are very interesting and actually very enlightening, especially if you do a quick Google search for their meaning. These medical terms actually add depth to the story and not just accessories to make the novel longer. The thing I was so shocked the most was how hilarious some of the scenes were told. I love the strong comic elements in this. The dark wit and the deadpan humor feels very modern to me. I would catch myself cackle so many times. Scenes from the first parts of Jonathan Harker's journal entries when he was going to and when he was inside Castle Dracula feels like I was watching scenes from What We Do in the Shadows, the movie by Taika Waititi and Jermaine Clement. Or it was like anyone from The Office went to meet the Count. It was really funny to read about all the red flags Harker would get along his way, and him being very naive and clueless. If you're a 90s kid in the Philippines, the vibe is just like the movie Gwapings, The First Adventure.
Na, malapit nang dumating ang gabi. Umalis na kayo. Bakit?
Don't touch me!
I was also so surprised by how bigger and meatier the roles of the female characters are in this original story as compared to how the movie adaptations handled the characterization of Mina and Lucy. Mina was absolutely a boss here in the story. Let's get to the scary and dark parts of this book. Hadlok jud kaayo. That's very, very scary in my mother tongue. I would get stomach aches and palpitations from the scariest parts of this book. Tinuod jud. I'm not kidding, it's true. The 19th century writer Anthony Hope Hawkins wrote to Stoker, "Your vampires rob me of sleep for nights." I couldn't agree more. I feel dread whenever I read about the flapping of bat wings against Lucy's window, about Lucy's sleepwalking escapades, and especially when journal entries would start with same day night. And then another example. It starts with September 17th night. So whenever the entries would start like this, I know that there's something terrible that will happen. Very, very frightening. Some of the scenes which stood out for me are everything basically in the first part, when Harker was going to and inside Castle Dracula. I especially remember really laughing very hard whenever the townspeople would make the sign of the cross towards Harker's direction whenever the Count's name is mentioned, and Harker, he would feel lost and he would wonder why the people would do that. The careful description of the meals in that part, it was like reading the menu from a fancy restaurant. The landscapes of the Carpathians were described so beautifully in that part. It was like being with Harker, discovering this foreign land for the first time. Another scene which stuck with me was Lucy sleepwalking to the hill. It was downright terrifying. If you have yet to read it, good luck to you. Dracula's entrance to Whitby through a ship was so dramatic. I love it so much. I also love that scene with Mina, Van Helsing, and the three brides of Dracula, and how Van Helsing, in his letter, described their voices as something like the intolerable sweetness of water glasses. Wow! Also, when Dracula was introduced for the first time, I just couldn't help but shriek like a fangirl. There are just so many memorable scenes in this book which are described so vividly and intensely that it's so difficult to pick a favorite. If you have read this novel, let me know your favorite parts of this story. Although I love everything in general, I do have to say that the ending feels so abrupt. It feels like it's just a rough draft of what could have been. Let me know if you feel the same way or not. Before I end this video, let me read to you some of my favorite quotes. But my very feelings changed to repulsion and terror when I saw the whole man slowly emerge from the window and begin to crawl down the castle wall over that dreadful abyss, face down, with his cloak spreading out around him like great wings. At first, I could not believe my eyes. I thought it was some trick of the moonlight, some weird effect of shadow. But I kept looking, and it could be no delusion. I saw the fingers and toes grasp the corners of the stones, worn clear of the mortar by the stress of years, and by thus using every projection and inequality, move downwards with considerable speed, just as a lizard moves along a wall. This makes me laugh. Once more have I seen the Count go out in his lizard fashion. This is so funny and terrifying at the same time. The last I saw of Count Dracula was his kissing his hand to me, with a red light of triumph in his eyes, and with a smile that Judas in hell might be proud of. If ever a face meant death, if looks could kill, we saw it at that moment. It's a masterpiece, this book. I actually have 3 editions already. Aside from this, I also have this modern library edition and also this Bantam Classic edition. I am so looking forward to rereading this book with the other editions. I love this book so much. I definitely highly recommend this. That's it for today. Thank you so much for clicking my video. I also added the link of the movie Nosferatu that's available here in YouTube. It's in my description box in case you're interested. Thank you so much again for clicking. I do hope to see you again next time. Take care and bye!
Thank you.